Today's world is facing big challenges. Using technology to make our communities smarter, safer, more efficient, equitable, and sustainable is no easy task. And for the pioneering visionaries that have taken on this challenge, we salute you. Welcome to Conversations with Smart City Pioneers, where we sit down with the best and brightest minds from around the globe, sharing how they are leading the smart city digital transformation revolution.
Good afternoon, David.
Hi, Herb. How's it going?
It's going great. I'm so glad that you could join us for another episode of Conversations with Smart City Pioneers, where we get to talk to people like you about all the lessons learned and all the great things that you're doing in the smart city and digital transformation space. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here with you, and especially getting to spend some time talking about our favorite subject, just changing the world.
Absolutely. So for those in the audience with me today, David Graham, you've got a very accomplished background. I know right now you're the Chief Innovation Officer for the City of Carlsbad, California. But really, I will tell you, in working with a lot of folks in your position, you really think about the world a little bit differently. Matter of fact, I've actually described you to folks that you're the Steve Jobs of, kind of a CIO type of level of experience. So, there's no black turtleneck that is needed. Your words speak for yourself. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and put some context around the smart city space, because in the past 5 to 10 to 15 years, the promise of smart city technologies probably got a little bit ahead of itself, but it seems like we're at a place in time today, and you've been on the front line for quite a while, to where the technology and the need and the understanding are all coming together at a really important time in history. So tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing today.
Well, thanks so much, because I always love to get to share, but also learn in these conversations from folks like yourselves. I've had the opportunity to be working on both the public and private side of local government for about 20 years now. Started as a lowly little intern in a mayor's office way back in the day, and through a number of different things, particularly in the San Diego region, worked in land use, in regional policy and transportation, worked at the regional government level, at the local level. And through all of that, I think one of the biggest things that I picked up was just this desire to solve problems and to solve the stickiest problems that were facing us, no matter what they were. And being here in Southern California, one of our biggest issues is always mobility, transportation, and traffic. Being a kid that grew up in the Los Angeles areas, I hated traffic and I hated being stuck in the car. And so working through land use planning and mobility issues and really trying to help make the San Diego region a better place, but then using the lessons learned here to be a greater, kind of a test bed, really a sandbox for innovation, is where I ended up landing. And so I've had some great opportunities. Previous to this, I was Deputy Chief Operating Officer for the City of San Diego. I came to the City of Carlsbad, which is in the northern part of San Diego County, a medium-sized city, but really one that punches above its weight. We're known for our 7 miles of beaches, also home to Legoland, California, and the largest desalination plant on the entire western coast of this continent. So lots of different exciting opportunities brought me to where I am. But it's not just about testing and trying things, it's about sharing and sharing that learning. And that's how I became involved and became the co-chair for executive education at Harvard's Technology and Entrepreneurship Center, a place where we're really bringing in people from the public, nonprofit, and private sectors to learn, to test, to try, to experiment, take risks, break things, do amazing things. And I think one of my favorite things is getting to spend time with folks like you, because it's through that collaboration and knowledge sharing that we're able to come up with how we're going to solve things. I mean, let's be honest, solving the big, hairy issues facing our urban centers, our rural areas, our communities, it's not one person going into a laboratory and thinking up the next big aha moment. There aren't that many eureka moments in government. It's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of collaboration, and it's working with people, and that's what I love to do.
Well, you certainly have a track record of getting a lot of things done, and particularly if you look at the state of California. And growing up, and I wasn't born in the 50s, but I was born in the 60s, and I know hearing the Beach Boys and other people talking about California. California has always been a lot of people's focal points of all the good things. But the price of those good things means there's a lot of people. And then you've got some of the challenges when you're, next door to nature and beauty. I know California, I'm not picking on California, but you guys have forest fires, mudslides, a lot of people. You've got the ocean, which is a harsh and beautiful environment all at the same time. And you talked about things like the desalinization plant, which, water and energy are really big themes these days, and talking about a large point of view, because without water, without power, and arguably without my cell phone signal, particularly with my kids, I cut off their Wi-Fi, man, I'm hearing about it in minutes. It really brings civilization to its knees. Tell me a little bit about when you're looking at Carlsbad and some of the projects that you think are really important. Is it just about technology, or is it a bigger issue that kind of brings, a lot of issues to the forefront? And what are you all doing in Carlsbad that you think is like so important? Or tell me a little bit about what's on your plate for Carlsbad right now. What's in your sandbox, but from a practical point of view, because you are solving problems.
It's interesting when you put it in such a huge aspect that we have to be considering all these things all at once. I mean, frankly, it probably makes most people want to curl up in a ball and cry and go home, or take a day off and sit by the fire in the rain, which, yes, it does rain in Southern California. And I will tell you, we've had storm after storm after storm here in the San Diego region, to the point that we're all joking about having to send in for our sunshine tax rebate, get our money back for paying those expensive prices for living in Southern California, because boy, it sure hasn't felt like it recently. But we see this as indicative of questions around climate change, right? And we're also seeing how that affects infrastructure. When you're used to 300 plus sunny days a year, our infrastructure isn't necessarily built to handle the things that we experience during some of these major events due to climate change or other reasons. So we have things on the southern part of our region, like the Tijuana River Valley and overflowing sewers and sewer systems from Mexico that are closing our beaches. We're having our own sewage plants and stormwater issues closing our beaches up and down the Southern California coast, because we're not built to be resilient. There's actually a sinkhole that ended up developing on one of the major freeways, east-west freeways here over the most recent storm. And it's because we don't have infrastructure that's built to last through these changing times and events. We're still trading on, and this is most of the country, big investments in infrastructure from the 1950s, from the 1960s. I remember joking with a local jurisdiction, and when I used to be a chief of staff to a city council member, we love to pick which president was the president when that particular sewer pipe was put into place, or that water pipe was put into place. And I think we got all the way back to Theodore Roosevelt for one of those breaks that ended up happening. So there have been these major investments in infrastructure that we're now having to completely rethink the game. And so in Carlsbad, a number of the things that we're doing from a regional perspective actually have a lot to do with making what we have today work. About in August of last year, we declared a state of emergency regarding bike and e-bike safety that related to traffic and transportation, because we'd had some serious high-profile events that occurred, and significant increase in accidents leading to injuries for automobiles, for bikes, et cetera. Why? Well, because like most cities, our roads were built to move vehicles, move them quickly, and primarily focus on the car. And while we've done a lot to adapt to active transportation, like biking and walking, we weren't there. Carlsbad's well known as a well master planned community, but it didn't have that new set of infrastructure as we see an increase in biking and walking and active transportation that is so critical to meet our climate change and sustainability goals. And you wouldn't necessarily think that a state of emergency, because our roads didn't all of a sudden crumble one day, but we recognized that we needed a focus around three big areas: a political focus, a community focus, a staff focus. And that's why the emergency was declared. And so we immediately began moving forward with a lot of normal practices, but on an accelerated rate. So protected bike lanes, high profile, high visibility crosswalks, moving into an education program in our schools. We did the 3 E's: engineering, education, and enforcement, but really with a focus on educating people about what to do. And what ended up happening? Well, we used data. My team took the lead in analyzing data around transportation and active transportation to begin to change and move users and their behaviors. And what we ended up seeing in a 6-month period was a reduction in all modes of transportation and also bike modes of transportation injury collisions. We'd expected a 20% increase in injury collisions of all modes of transportation in the last quarter of the year. Not only did we flatline that, but we reversed that to a 40% decrease in injury during that exact same period of time. And during the time of the emergency, when comparing it with the previous period of time in the year, we had about a 20% reduction in collisions. And for bikes specifically, which is a small subset, obviously, but we saw about a 13% reduction in just 6 months. How did we do that? Well, it's the same thing that we need to apply in each one of these areas when we're taking on those big challenges around equity, infrastructure, sustainability. We started with a data-informed approach. So we went in, figured out the data, we made sure it was quality and we were gathering what we needed. We then had targeted interventions in each of these areas, but we collaborated with the community more than anything else. I mean, you could have thrown a whole bunch of cops on roads and made some change, but that's not sustainable change. We did an entire Safer Streets pledge, and we ended up having thousands of people putting stickers on their cars, getting educated, making the pledge to actually help create safer streets. And the community bond that has created in just the 6 months is going to lead to change over the long term. And I can tell you anecdotally, the middle schoolers I see riding around on their e-bikes that were not wearing helmets, going 2 and 3 at a time. It's shocking, and we joke about it being anecdotal, but those kids are seeing and becoming a part of change because they bought into this idea. They didn't want to see another friend of theirs hurt. They didn't want to see their mom and dad get killed on the roads. They are becoming our greatest spokespeople in trying to create that long-term change.
Well, that's incredible. I know that oftentimes in these projects, the hardest part is not the technology. It's not always even the planning. It's the people and getting change and changing the culture, not just the people that are directly in line with the project, but getting those people to be able to evangelize and advocate and really act as a diffuser of these ideas. It's easy to get early adopters, to get excited about something, but to get a community to have a cultural shift is huge. One question I've got for you on this project, one of the things that we've seen is it's really hard to get people to work, not only within their department and think differently, because it's hard because you've got sometimes very established ways, but to work across departments. And that siloed situation that we see so many governments, and unfortunately they know they live in it, but they don't know how to break the cycle. To be able to get a project like this to really be successful, I would imagine you had to get multiple stakeholders, multiple departments with multiple assets. And by the way, you've got the public as a constituency group they have to work with too. How did you break down some of the barriers to really change people and process to get this done? Because I'm guessing you had multiple departments that were involved.
As you mentioned, I've found that you can almost always find a technology to do most of, if not all of what you want. That's not the barrier to solving challenges and problems. We oftentimes forget about, I think, a real empathy and consideration and understanding, not necessarily of the public, because we do a lot of public engagement and outreach, and we focus a lot of attention there, but on our own internal staff, our organization, our leaders, and helping them find ways, not just of doing the work, but believing and buying into the mission. When we take a top-down approach, you'll get things to go so far. But what we found was, from the city manager all through the ranks, when we had those conversations that respected the opinions, ideas, and collaboration at all levels of the organization, it didn't matter whether you were the traffic engineer that is helping to design a street, or the police officer who's on the road, or the communications staff that were doing the pledge. People felt like they had a hand in changing the community. And oftentimes we have forgotten that in our large organizations, in our case, almost 1,000 people, that this idea of public service, so often people are getting beaten down every day, but they're there day in and day out. And so by valuing those opinions, by crowdsourcing those from inside the organization, by setting a very clear vision with a time frame, a timeline, and then the systems to collaborate across. We used, of course, the emergency incident command for some of that, but people really became bought in. And so the city workers that were residents in Carlsbad, they're signing up for the pledge. The people that may not have lived in the city, but really cared and commuted to and from, they were buying in. And so if I think about how you deal with those questions, people talk about silos and breaking down silos. And what I've found is, while that is a notion that has value and merit, it's not like one day you're going to go to a completely flat organization. I mean, think about this for a second. Take what a silo is, right? Think of a grain silo. If you were to break down all the grain silos in a farm, what did you just have? You just have a whole bunch of grain, a mess of grain everywhere, right? You're from the Midwest. You know what that would look like. It would be a complete mess. So what do I think of when I think of silos? I think about creating windows, doors, and doormats, seeing into those other departments, inviting and open, and creating the door of collaboration and connection, which oftentimes starts with three things: communication, the sharing of data, and valuing the input of everyone. That's how you can take things and accelerate to solve these big, hairy, audacious issues.
That's a great point. That's a huge point. I'm going to shift gears now, and I'm going to try and throw you a curveball, but there are no curveballs I think I can get across your plate that you can't hit. Shift out of Carlsbad, because you've seen a lot, you speak a lot, you're very well informed, and you're a forward thinker thinking about big problems. What are the areas that either you're most excited about to say, gosh, if we could tackle these problems that are not only important to, Carlsbad and California, the world, what are the biggest areas? And I'm going to challenge you by saying, what are the areas that you think that we've got a real chance of addressing through the lens of, technology as well? Because again, I mean, technology is just a tool, but some of the technology we've talked about in the past is now just coming into the prime time, but there's a lot of challenges. Where are you most excited to say, gosh, I think we've got a lot of opportunity to make a real big difference in these areas?
The places I think we have some of the biggest ability using technology, and then I'll talk about what the barrier is, but how that could be transformative, are first in the area of mobility and transportation. I mean, we have more information, more data, more opportunities to understand how to move our cities, move them around, move between modes, mode share. I think those are huge opportunities right there in the traffic and mobility space. Plus, we have federal funding coming down to do a lot of that, and every city around the country needs to be taking advantage of that. We have flexible fleets that are occurring. I was involved and helped to create the Free Ride Everywhere downtown in San Diego, an on-demand floating system that is getting people throughout all of downtown San Diego using parking meter revenue. They're just expanding that now to get people from the trolley to the beach. So we're in a much more flexible ability to do mobility solutions and transportation solutions. Sure, it's tough, but take advantage of all the opportunities for last mile. It's still something. Sure, the scooter revolution, the e-bike revolution, that was a thing for a little while. That's taken some places, but those are real impactful things, will also affect climate change that we should be taking advantage of. The second is in this space of sustainability and resiliency. And while there is a lot of investment, I think that shared power, solar power, wind power, all the power options, we're looking at offshore power now, moving away from our dependence upon fossil fuels is clearly not just something that is good for the environment, but it's also good for business. I'm a board member of Clean Tech San Diego, and the rocketing number of companies that are doing innovative things in how we use data regarding power, how we create clean power. There is so much wasted power in the grid and around our systems that with microgrids and investments there, technology can do so much more. And as a user, we have the ability to explain to people what their footprint is. I'm not talking about carbon footprint. I mean, that's one thing, but how much water you're using, how much energy you're using, how much you're
Yeah.
traveling, just the insights a human can get. We have a system that detects anomalies in people's water usage and notifies them. We're talking about saving people real money, but also saving water at the exact same time. Insights regarding our footprint and resource utilization, leveraging the power of people's cheapskateness, if you will, is something that I think has a lot of value and completely tied to technology and doable. The final thing I will say, though, and the place to accelerate without huge dollar amount investments, but huge human investments, is in the space of data sharing, data collection, and working together. I can tell you that when we wanted to help our fire department have better insights about its operations, reduce the amount of time it takes to get to a call, reduce the amount of time getting that paramedic to somebody, or getting somebody from a jurisdiction next to us to a person, to literally save lives, we had to work with a joint powers authority to get computer-aided dispatch data out of them, basically your 911 data. By doing that, we've literally saved lives by being able to share data, create insights for the fire department, and do some amazing things I'll have to show you the next time you're down, in being able to understand our operations. We can be doing the same thing with homelessness data, with regional homelessness data. We can be doing the same thing with data that is being collected at the county level, at the state level, sharing those insights down to local government, the federal level. There's so much information and data that exists that's being collected and used. And yet, back to the silos, we have built up a kingdom of walls. We've built up our castles, and we have an army of lawyers who are going to tell you, and I appreciate the profession because they try to keep us safe, but an army of lawyers to tell you why you can't do something. Except for technology today has given us the ability to anonymize data, to protect data, and certainly cyber attacks will happen. But I will tell you that it's not going to be because you're sharing it with another jurisdiction. It's going to be because somebody at the state decided to click on that, oh my gosh, your Amazon card was hacked, phishing link, and the next thing you know, you've compromised your entire parole system or something along those lines. Data sharing, the insights from it, and getting federal, state, local, and regional governments to work together with that information is probably one of the least expensive from a technology standpoint and most impactful things that we could be doing today.
Well, the fact that you set up a data dashboard here in areas, I'm hearing you describe the silos with windows and doors and doormats. Those to me all sound like almost dashboard points to where the ability to, liberate data, expose it to the right people at the right time. You make an interesting point about being able to understand, footprint. I was recently booking a plane ticket on a major airline, and I got to see how much carbon that flight is producing. I haven't seen that before. Maybe that's not that new, but that certainly was new to me, and I hadn't really thought about that dimension. So it seems like people's understanding of the world around them and how they interact with it, that data is everything, and then figuring out what to do with it next. So that's amazing. Okay, so let me ask you this point of view, when you look forward, um, sometimes people are declaring moonshots that are really big beliefs or hopes maybe of what the next 5 to 10 to 15 years look like. Where do you think this goes? How do you think smart cities look? Or maybe we just call them cities that are smart, because like a smartphone, we don't call smartphones smartphones. I just call it my phone again. But what does the world look like in 10 to 15 years in the world of coming out of smart cities and technology to be able to make the world a better place? What do you think it looks like?
Well, I think that if I were to be in my most hopeful self, It would be that we have created a more robust data sharing community that is looking for efficiencies and economies of scale and reducing redundancies between our organizations and agencies. And I think if we could do that, that would have a big impact. I do think we will see a better informed public. And by seeing a better informed public, we'll be able to be addressing some of those big issues like transportation, mobility, and climate change. The last thing I'm hopeful for, and this is probably the most difficult, is moving to a point in time where we can look for the hairy, audacious human goals and find the commonalities amongst ourselves instead of the differences. And that's where we're going to find true change, whether it's politically or organizationally, or pick the reasons why you want to think that you're different than somebody else or better than or worse than. That is the place that I hope that in 10 to 15 years, we as humans have realized the threats to our life, our planet, our kids' lives, our grandkids' lives, and we put those things aside for a common goal of making this world a better place.
I will choose to be equally as hopeful on this call. I remain there most days, and I think that's a great way to look at it. I think that's essential because we're all in this together, whether we want to believe it or not. So that's a great point of view. That's a big, big, big goal. So as we close here, what else? I know that when I talk with folks all around the country, and I talk to a lot of folks in a variety of positions, there's a lot of work. Luckily, there's funding right now at this point in time as we record this show. But there's a lot of, okay, what do we do next? It's pushing a big boulder up a hill. If you had to give one piece of advice to a city, and saying, okay, here's how you want to think about it. What would you provide to them as that piece of advice to really say, okay, if you're going to be successful and push, just there's a lot of leadership out of your region of the country in this space. What would you give them?
Number one, understand your opportunities and challenges and don't try to be like somebody else. Go figure out what other people have done and adapt it to your circumstances, and then take what you've learned and share it with others. In doing that, you're going to be able to accelerate change, to do it better and more impactfully, and also leave the world a better place.
Gosh, with that, we've got to end. I can't add anything more to that beautiful statement. So thank you, Dave, for being on again, yet another episode of Conversations with Smart City Pioneers. You truly are and have been and continue to be a pioneer, despite the fact that you've been doing this for years. You're still on the tip of the spear, and we appreciate everything you're doing, not only your community, but for the world and, folks like, my world and my kids too. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Herb, appreciate it and have a fantastic day.
Thank you.